Okay, so this is just a very light conversation, really. Hindi naman siya sobrang, alam mo yun, we would really want not to make this boring. It's really just a conversation. So if you have any questions or you have any clarifications, just, jump in. Tapos kami ni Reverend Joseph will try to answer them as much as possible. Okay, so just to start, okay, we would like to put lang this first. This is from the Genesis story, from Genesis 1:27, and it says, ayusin ko lang yung screen ko, medyo nag-struggle ako sa ano. Okay, so God created humankind in God's image, in the image of God, and God created them, male and female, He created them. Now, popular or at least in the context of the current mainstream churches, ang translation nila dyan is God created man. That's why kaya nagkaroon nung Adam and Eve persona in the context of the creation story in the Genesis. But yan, okay. In the original Hebrew translation, the Adama is actually not male. Okay? The Adama means earthling or earth or soil. Hindi si Eva ay lalaki. Hindi si Adam ay lalaki at si Eva ay babae. So yung mga ganyan. Since we are in a church setting, we just want to break this point first para wala lang magkaroon ng intimidation, and at the same time we want to free the thought on that the first creation was not man. It's actually a human or an earthling. Okay. Reverend Joseph, medyo may gusto ko bang i-add sa portion lang na to?
Okay, so ang Old Testament, before I go there, since we are at church, so before, when we do SOGIE workshop or our SOGIE sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression workshop, meron kaming value-added information. So since we are at church, before we do the actual workshop of SOGIE, we present this particular content about in the Christian progressive understanding, it was not actually male or man that was created first, as what has been preached or taught to us for the longest time. If we go back to the original Hebrew of because the Bible, the Old Testament Bible, is written in Hebrew, so if we go back to the original language, what was actually created was called Adam, taken from the word Adama. And Adama means red soil, pulang lupa, no? And so God created Adam from Adama, from the red soil. Now, yung Adam is not actually a proper name. Although, we admit that later on, naging proper name siya. But it's in the first instance that it was mentioned in Genesis, it was not a name of a person. It was actually, it was simply something God called or was called do sa kanyang nilikha. And the proper translation would be in the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, the NRSV version, kinorek na nila yon by translating Adam to humankind. So God created humankind instead of the previous translation of God created man. So medyo kinorek na nila. There's a translation of the Bible who already corrected the translation. The other translation would be earthling, kasi nga from the earth, taken from the earth. And doon sa nabasa nating passage sa Genesis, so God created the humankind. Male and female God created them. So what was actually created was, in the beginning, was a human that had two genders or two sexualities uh, in just one person. So what actually was created in the beginning, as far as the Hebrew Jewish creation story, Genesis 1, was someone who, one person who had two sexes. So in a way, we can interpret it in a way. What was actually created in the beginning um, was an intersex.
Intersex, yeah.
Was intersex, having two of the sexes in that one person. Or arguably, we can even argue the interpretation that perhaps this can also be considered as transgendered human being, having both the male and the female aspects within that first creation. Um, and then later on in Genesis 2, meron tayo yung story na pinatulog ng Diyos si Adam, yung Adam. At the popular translation and the popular story that we know, kinuha sa tadyang si Eva. Hindi rin actually accurate yung pagkakatransmit nun sa atin, because the Hebrew that was translated later on as tadyang is not actually tadyang. The Hebrew word is tsela. And tsela, whenever it is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, it always pertains to side, gilid. So, for example, the tsela was used to refer to the side of the temple, the side of a house, the side of a table. The only time that it was ever translated to mean tadyang was in the Genesis story. So, Dr. Renato Lings, a Bible scholar and translator, said that perhaps we had the translation wrong and we had the story wrong, in a way that what might have happened was, so there was the first human being that was created, and what God did was not actually take a rib, because the Hebrew word was not rib, but that God divided this human being equally into, dinivide niya into two equal human beings, separating the male aspect and the female aspect of this Adam. So yun yung now a revisiting and a progressive take of the creation story, the Judeo-Christian creation story of humans, looking at the original Hebrew language. And now, among progressive Christians, we no longer believe that the first creation was man or male. Most likely it was intersex, or other interpretations can be that it is a transgendered person, and that at some point in Genesis 2, what happened was that God divided this intersex or transgendered human, so that there is a sexual differentiation between male and female. So yun.
Okay, thank you for that.
And our reference for that is Love, Loss in Translation by Dr. Renato Lings. You can check that reference.
Thank you, Reverend Joseph. This is actually very important for us, because this is one of the many passages in the Bible where people, or at least the mainstream homophobic churches, are pertaining to when it comes to sexuality, oppression on sexuality. Later on, if we have time, we can discuss more on why, or where the oppression on sexuality is coming from. So, kaya na-mention namin specifically this one. Okay. So, we have a photo here. The one has a pink clothes, two babies with pink clothes, and then the other one is blue. So which of them is a girl, or which is a boy and which is a girl, and which one is an LGBT and which one is not? So really, hindi naman natin siya masasabi, right, at face value, because there are certain, let's say for example, their sex, we could not see their actual gender, things like that. Okay. Okay. So just a disclaimer lang, this SOGIE 101 is based from the American Psychological Association's definition of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other related terms. Pero mas paiikliin lang natin siya ng very, very light para we can discuss more on our experiences. Okay. Thus, I would like to introduce to you to some of my friends. This is the gender unicorn, and this is the gender bread person. Anyone familiar with them? Is there anyone familiar with them? Is this the first time that you've encountered this one? No, you're not familiar? Okay, sige. This is a tool that we use to um, lecture on SOGIE, one of the easy tools that we use. Okay, so let's start with the sex. Dalawa lang naman yon. Or actually, hindi pala dalawa or tatlo. Pwede rin tatlo or pwede multiple. Or depende kung ano pang other scientific cases. But dalawa siya. Merong keps at merong jetits at meron din namang both. Okay? Clear ba yun sa atin? So merong keps. This is the biological sex assigned at birth. So kapag pinanganak ka, titingnan lang naman ng mga doctors or ng mga nurses kung ano yung lalabas doon kapag pinanganak ka, tapos ilalagay nila male or female. Yan, okay. Clear ba yan? Okay, so in my case, I have this. By the way, if you have papers pala or dribble some notes, para later on, you could do this as well. So ako, in my case, I have jetits. Okay? Kakabit ko lang siya dito. Okay. Okay? So, that would determine your parang femaleness or maleness. So, minsan, in the case of, let's say, for example, may mga kids na dalawa yung organs nila or dalawa yung organs nila, tapos which sometimes hindi pa ma-determine until na mature pa sila eventually. Okay? And then we have here, so clear lang yon, madali lang yon. Black and white siya or gray lang siya. And then we have the gender identity, kung ano yung nasa isip mo, ikaw. How do you identify yourself? Are you a woman or are you a man or are you, let's say for example, neither or both? Okay. Yeah. So how you, it's definitely, it's how in your head do you define your gender based on kung ano yung nasa isip mo. Okay? Yeah. Sorry. Now, mas magiging complex when it comes to your attraction. Now, attraction kasi, so by the way, if let's say for example, this and this is not aligned, sometimes pwede kasing transgender ang yung identity. Okay? So kapag may hindi align sa yung sexual organ, and then in your head, let's say for example, men or trans men, sometimes they are at birth they're assigned with at birth they have the vagina. Pero pag as nung lumaki sila, ang nasa isip nila hindi pala aligned sa isip nila yung sex nila. So sometimes doon yung sorry guys, medyo nagsistruggle ako. So doon yung case na nagiging transgender. So kapag hindi aligned yung sexual organ and then yung identity in your head. Okay? Now, in case of the attraction or pwede kasing sexual attraction or relationship or emotional attraction, kanino ka ba na a-attract? Kanino ka ba nalilibugan? Kanino ka ba or saan ka ba nagkakaroon ng liking? Okay. So pwede kasi na sa wala, hindi ka attracted to anyone at all, or pwedeng attracted ka sa more women or more men, or pwede rin namang both. Kasi yung attraction na yan, spectrum siya. So, in my case, in my case, my attraction is more on the masculine male. Yan. And then we have the expression. The expression is also a spectrum. Pwedeng at this point more on feminine ka, or at this point you're more on masculine ka. Pwede rin namang feminine 0.5, masculine 0.6, ganyan. Okay. Okay, yeah, like I mentioned, in the case of the transgenders, most of the time, all the time, hindi aligned kasi yung kanilang sex assigned at birth, and yung kanilang diwang kamalayan na kung sila ay babae or kung sila ay lalaki. At hindi, kasi most of the time hindi siya tugma. So yung iba are able to go through the transition, yung iba naman hindi. So sometimes, like in the case of our friend Joy, she is a transgender woman, pero he could not go into the transition because economically wise, hindi siya, wala siyang capacity to do it economically. Now, in the case of the attraction and the expression, it's more on the spectrum. So, meron tayong more feminine in terms of attraction. Halimbawa ako, let's say, kunwari, at this point, mas gusto ko ang more feminine. Tapos mga 10 years later on, more on masculine na yung bet ko. Ganyan. Okay? And then, in the case of, let's say, for example, my expression, when I was in high school, I'm more on ultra-feminine, ganyan. And then when I went to college, medyo more on masculine ako. So it's really a spectrum. Nagbabago-bago yung interaction and expression. However, in terms of sex, it's there. It's really easy. Titingnan mo lang kung positive or negative, or sometimes neither or both. Then in your identity, ano ka ba sa isip mo? Ano ba yung sa isip mo, ano ka ba? Kung ikaw ba ay lalaki, ikaw ba ay babae, or kung ikaw ba ay neither or both. Kaya maraming lumalabas sa mga terminologies right now. Let's say for example, non-binary, but we will not be dealing on the boxes or the labels right now, because we want to give everyone the freedom to really decide on, or probably hindi nyo rin gusto yung mga terminologies or boxes like that. Okay. Any questions so far? Hello? Any questions so far?
Okay, I have a question. But I'm not sure if this will be discussed later. Dun sa identity and expression, how much of it is determined or influenced by nurture, and how much of it is by choice? Like, for example, in my case, I remember in my childhood na I like to express in a feminine way, which was criticized by my family because syempre heteronormativity and somewhat toxic masculinity. So parang I grew to reject anything feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So so parang I don't know if is it because of yung upbringing ko kaya I feel that I identify as a man and I'm more masculine, or was this something that was how would you call it, negatively impacted by my upbringing? Kumbaga kung hindi sila intervene, dapat pa feminine ako?
Well, I can't really answer that. But yeah, good question on, kasi gender is really just a construct. It is assigned based on the traditions. It is assigned based on the culture that you are currently in. Let's say, for example, in the American, Native Americans, there's what we call a two-spirit. So they welcome the femininity and masculinity, at walang tawag nito. In a patriarchal society kasi, it is always assumed na kapag lalaki ka, you have to kilos lalaki. Pag babae ka, kailangan Barbie ang hawak mo. Pag lalaki ka, baril-barilan. At yun yung nakalakihan natin. Most of us, actually, yun yung nakalakihan natin. Kaya, yung hate or yung in the opinions of other, kaya minsan titigil tayo na maging, ay, hindi na lang ako magpapaka feminine kasi it is not generally accepted. Or in the context of the, I may be wrong, in the context of gay men right now, mas acceptable ang masculine acting or straight acting because yun yung mas more attractive. That's why some just drop their feminine acts or feminine na pananamit or feminine na expression ng pananalita or ang pagdadamit because sometimes we fear rejection, and that's one. In our families din naman, especially with strict families who have conservative religious background, medyo siya. Kasi minsan kapag lumabas tayo, medyo flaming, flaming expression tayo of our happiness and joy. Pero when we are at home, medyo uptight ang acts natin because we do not want our families to be uncomfortable or we do not want them to be angry or things like that. And I think it's a mixture of those two. Kaya natitimpla yung expression natin and then yung attraction natin, mainly due to the experiences I think that we have. Sorry, nasagot ko ba yung tanong mo, Josh? Or do you have any?
Yes, somewhat. I believe Ram he raised his hand. Do you have a question, Ram?
Sorry, okay. Go, Ram.
Yes, thank you. Ayun, salamat. Ang tanong ko kanina, nabanggit mo yung ultra-femme, yung dinidiscuss mo yung transgenderism.
Sorry. I'll go.
Ayos lang. Ang question ko, yung femininity na binabanggit mo ay yung regarding siya sa pag-accentuate ng transgender. Tama ba?
Sorry, what do you mean by
Yung
accentuate?
yung nearness niya sa nearness dun sa quote-unquote babaihan. Yung pagiging quote-unquote pagmumukhang babae.
Okay.
Yun ba yung ibig mo sabihin? Sorry.
When I mentioned about the transgender, it's a different case kasi altogether. Okay, so balik tayo. So, yung sex, yung ari, at yung identity, in the case of the transgender, they're really not matched. Hindi talaga siya match. Now, there are people who can transition or kaya nilang let's say for example, express, in the case of a trans woman, they can express in a more feminine because they have the means or they have the capacity or probably they have the courage. And some do not have kasi they do not have probably the the financial or whatnot side of it, kaya hindi sila makapag-express na sila ay trans woman. I mentioned that kasi in the case of our friend Choi, sumalangit na ang kaluluwa, if you will look Choi, you will not assume that she is a trans woman, but she is. It's just so happened that she could not fully transition because number one, she does not have the financial capacity to purchase female clothes or feminine clothes. She could not purchase yung hormones. So kapag titingnan mo siya, para siyang ako. Ayan, ito, parang ako. Pero trans woman siya. In her identity is a trans woman. So, yun lang naman.
Okay, got it. Okay, so sorry. Tama. So ang iniisip ko, ang term ay passing. Merong yung transgender community, meron silang term na ginagamit, passing yung term, PASSING. Yung pag mukhang yung passing siya na biological woman. So, kala ko may academic na ibig sabihin yung ultra femininity. But thank you.
Na-mention ko lang yun. Yung sa spectrum, I was mentioning about on the spectrum. Now, and this might complicate make the conversation a little bit complex. In the case of trans or transgenders, if let's say for example, kunwari ako, I was at birth I was assigned with I have genetics, pero in my head I know that I am a woman, I am female. And then okay, nakapag-transition na ako. I had the surgery, I had the clothing to really look like a woman para to align with my identity. Pero yung attraction ko can be, let's say for example, can also be with a woman. Did you get the picture?
Yeah, malinaw na. Salamat. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I was just opening the discussion on like that. If let's say for example I am a trans woman, but my attraction is also to a woman, what do you think of that? No, anyone can answer. Sorry, go Ram. Sige, if you have an answer. Ram.
Lesbian? Trans-lesbian tawag?
Can be, yes, because okay, number one, I do not want to put labels. I just would like to clear that up. Hindi tayo mag-mention ng mga sangkatutak na labels dito like bi, gay, lesbian, let's say, hindi tayo magaganyan. But yes, in the case kasi of transgender, they are considered straight. It's just so happen that their sex assigned at birth is not aligned with their identity. So that can happen. Kasi sometimes yung mga people, lalaki ka naman before, tapos sana naging lalaki ka na lang, babae din naman pala yung papatulan mo. Sana nag-stick ka na lang dun sa dati mo. But kaya natin din-discuss tong SOGIE. Kasi sometimes, ito yung formula, well, not really the formula, but this is the 4 major points. In our, iba pa rin kasi yung gravity ng identity. In some case of the transgender, when they look at themselves in the mirror, it's may mali. Minsan may mali kapag hindi akma yung nakikita nila sa salamin versus dun sa tunay na identity nila. So yun, na-open ko lang yung conversation na yun. Just in case. Yes, that we can, quote and quote, patawarin ako ng Diyos, categorize, ayokong gamitin yung term na yun, to trans woman lesbian. Pwede. Yes. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Go, Gerald.
Yeah. Since you discussed earlier that identity is the mindset, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's a mindset.
Well, it's really more deeper than that.
Okay. I just want to be
how
sure
you
with that.
perceive kasi. It's deeply rooted sa consciousness mo. Kamalayan.
Is it a constant thing or it changes?
Well, it might, yes.
Yeah, because that's what I'm going to go through next. Because you were explaining that expression is depending on the it's a spectrum.
Spectrum, correct.
Right? Yeah, and then so it changes, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I just want to further discuss it with attraction as well. It's the same. It changes, right?
Yes.
It might
depending on your environment, situation, whatever factor that would affects it, right?
Experience, yes.
Yeah. And then one more thing, I have a question. I just want to be aligned, okay? Baka mamaya, what I'm thinking is, because I'm trying to question
go lang, conversation
your
lang.
discussion with, what do you call it? Feminism and then masculinity. Like, is it really a big factor? Like, I'm not sure. I just want to be aligned and I don't want to be tone deaf. So I want to know, like, is it in a case like in the Philippines? Ganun ba yun?
What do you mean?
Parang,
Sorry.
It makes you look lesser if you're more feminine, or
that's a good question. Sure. Later on, we will be discussing that. That's a good question. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. That is a good question. In the case of anyway, sige, medyo ipahapyawan na natin ng very light. In a world that is probably dominated with patriarchal, mindset or patriarchal culture, anything feminine is not of equal to masculine. Kaya in the Bible, in the Bible, kaya dinibreak namin yung sa Genesis story that the first creation was man. The second creation was a woman, just to really break that patriarchal mindset. But anyway, anything feminine is unacceptable kasi, Reverend Joseph, medyo tulungan mo ako dito sa part na to. Medyo nagsastruggle lang ako. Pero yeah.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to.
Hindi, pero yeah, tama. May, ano yung question mo?
Okay, but are we clear that sex, attraction, identity, and expression are certain categories that most of the time aligned sila, even among gay people? But there are categories, there are instances na hindi aligned ang sex with attraction, with identity, and with expression. So that's what is being discussed in terms of the transgender. There are experiences, there are consciousness, diwang kamalayan na hindi necessarily aligned with expression, not necessarily aligned with sex not necessarily aligned with with attraction. And there can be a multiple different kinds of combinations to this Western categories of identity, attraction, and sex. So gusto ko lang makasure na we understand what sex is, what attraction is, what identity is, what expression is, and that there are times and there are people whose experience and whose kamalayan does not
Are
necessarily aligned yung mga bagay na yan. And again, one example is a transgender woman, assigned male at birth, but ang kanyang consciousness, malalim na kamalayan ay siya ay babae, pero may instance na ang automatic kasi natin iisipin, attracted siya with male. But there are instances na even though trans woman siya, attracted pa rin siya with female. So may ganong mga human experiences, human consciousness, human expressions. Doon sa sinasabi ni Jack kanina na mga trans people na hindi nakakapag-express ng kanilang identity, ang sinasabi niya, one factor would be the economic capacity of a trans person to actually transition or not able to transition. Pero meron din namang mga trans people who might choose not to transition even if they have the economic means, right? Merong mga trans people who decide not to have reassignment surgery. And there are trans people who would decide to undertake a sex reassignment surgery. So yon, gusto ko muna malinaw tayo doon. And then the other part that Jack was discussing is the spectrum. So gender and sexuality can be understood either or. It can be a spectrum, meaning that there are people who are really, really LGBT, really, really gay, or really, really trans. And there are people who are really straight and really cisgender. Cisgender, yun yung pag nag-a-align yung kanilang sex with their identity. And then, pag spectrum siya, so there are these binaries, the gay and the straight, the transgender and the cisgender. And there are people who go through the spectrum na somewhat gay, more gay, a little bit gay, more straight pero a little bit
0.5.
yung mga ganon. So yun yung spectrum. There are binaries, but there are people who fall in between these binaries. Now, if you look at it as a continuum, pag sinasabing continuum, ito naman yung nabanggit kanina na there are certain experiences where mas feminine ako nung bata ako. But later on, I decided to be more masculine when I was in my 20s. And then when I was in my 40s, I decided to be feminine again. Yun naman yung understanding ng spectrum. There are certain people whose life experience from childhood to adulthood, nagbabago-bago yung kanilang gender expression, sexuality, or even gender identity. There are people we know, a very small portion of it, na previously, for most of their life, they are straight, but later on, they found themselves, oh, I'm actually transgender, when they're already 50 years old or 45 years old. Or there are actually trans people who, for the longest time in their life, they experience that they are transgender, but later on yung tinatawag natin detransition. Of course, we don't like that, and it's a very rare occurrence, where it does happen. There are a few individuals who are transgender for most of their lives, but and then later on they decide to go back to, for whatever reason or whatever experience that they had, they decide to go back to not being transgender. So yun yung spectrum. Yun din yung pag sinasabi natin sa expression na femininity, masculinity. So you have these binaries. Some people are really feminine, some people are really masculine, but there are a lot of people who fall in between these two binaries, or maybe not at all, because there are also now people who would say that I do not
belong to any
I do not belong to any of
Any
these
category.
categories. I do not feel to be male or female. I am beyond these categories. I am gender fluid, or I am non-binary. So
Very quickly. I will para lang medyo interactive din yung activity. I would go through each and every one. So we have the 4 items, right? What I want you to do is yung parang ginagawa ko kanina. What sex do you have at birth? And then in your identity, are you feminine? Are you female or male? And then yung attraction mo ba is towards male or female, or towards masculine or feminine in terms of sexual attraction or romantic attraction? And then what is your expression? Okay, great. Pastor Joseph, Kyle, go next.
So I'm male, assigned male at birth. Gender identity is male, very male. My attraction is with male or men, so I'm gay. And my gender expression is also more masculine. So I'm what you call aligned, very aligned.
Okay, Christopher. Christopher Celeste.
Ay, ako ba? Akala ko yung
Yes.
isang is... Okay. Kaya ako. Ano ba? Gender identity...
Yung sex
Okay,
assigned mo
sorry.
at birth?
Sex assigned at birth.
Biological sex?
Male.
Mm-hmm.
Gender identity male. Romantically and sexually attracted to male. And gender expression more on masculine. I think.
Yeah. Masculine point Demi Lovato.
Yes.
What we say is, hi, this is Pastor. What we say with regard at the end of every SOGIE workshop, that at least for me, what I do when I give the SOGIE workshop, at the end of it, I always say that what we call to be labels, gay, trans, cis, the LGBTQIA+++, the labeling and the categorization is only so that we can understand the different experiences, different identities, and different consciousness of people, that these experiences, that these self-determinations actually exist. That is the only purpose of it. The labels beyond the workshop should not be used to define people.
Yes.
Because we are not defined as human beings. We are not defined by being gay. We are not defined by being trans. We are not defined, we are so much more than our sexualities and gender identities. So it is helpful to use certain labels, names, or categories to understand to have a certain understanding of people's experiences and consciousness and identities, and to say that these things, these experiences exist, but it should stop there. At the end of the day, however a person identifies, however a person expresses themselves, is simply that the person is a human being who is different from you, who is different from me, who is different from others, and that it is a valid human experience. It is a valid human expression. So at the end of the day, isa pa sa sinasabi namin, after ng workshop na to, hindi mo gagamitin tong workshop na to. Tingin ko yung kapitbahay namin, Bex. Ay tingin ko gender fluid yung nasa kabilang kanto. No, that's not the point of SOGIE workshop or understanding SOGIE. Also, again, one of our disclaimers kanina was that this is a Western psychological understanding of gender identity and expression. In the field naman of anthropology, for example, sa Pilipinas, there have been anthropologists who studied certain tribes that one particular tribe is the Teduray tribe in Mindanao. Sa kanila, pag pinanganak yung isang bata, hindi nila tinitignan kaagad kung ito ba ay lalaki o babae na bata, no? Tao. Ang pagtingin nila sa isang batang pinanganak ay tao. And the gender is something that is determined later on. Determined by how the person will function in their tribe. And so they have certain members of their tribe na later on who chose to live as a female, who chose to live and to function as a female in their tribe even though male siya at birth. But yun nga hindi nila tinitignan yung child as male at birth. So may ganon, no? Also, the other thing that was mentioned kanina ni Gerald about extreme masculinity or extreme femininity, or yung ano yung tanong kanina, yung pag mas masculine ba sa Pilipinas, mas acceptable? So one of the other extra information that we give for SOGIE workshop, ako kasi I believe it's not enough for us to understand sexuality and gender identity. I also believe that together with it, we should understand where does the oppression come from? Where does the discrimination come from? Anong social, cultural, political basis ng discrimination and oppression ng mga LGBTQ? Which is actually part 2 ng workshop na ito. So I don't want to get ahead of the part 2, but just to give you something, in the Philippine I don't know about Europe or the US, but in the Philippines, natin to, lalo na sa mga Bex, I don't know about some of our female participants here, but among the gay people, we know that in Grindr, ano yan? Mask for mask. Bawal ang fem. Hindi nga lang yun.
Top
may
to
mga
top,
nabasa ko before na.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor Joseph, for that insight. Yes. Later on, we will be discussing more on the root of the systemic oppression.
The root of evil.
Yes, the root of all evil. Very quick lang din. In the case of, let's say, in a straight person, let's start with the male. Ang sexual assigned ng isang straight male ay penis or ethics. Tapos in his head, siya ay lalaki. And then probably ang kanyang attraction ay on the female or feminine. sometimes ang expression ng isang lalaki na is straight ay can be on the softer side or on yung hindi masculine, hindi yung normal na masculine na perceived ng pagiging lalaki. Meron kasing mga straight male na hindi mahilig maglaro ng basketball. Yung gustong nananahimik lang sa isang lugar, yung gustong manahe or ang expression nila ay hindi sobrang aggressive. That is possible. Kaya may mga instances na kahit straight si kuya, sasabihin, bakla naman yan eh, ganyan. Which is not always the case. It's just so happened na there are different spectrums of expression. Kaya minsan yung mga straight guys ay nagiging trap din sa ganyang consciousness. Meron din namang babae na in their sex is vagina, in their head they are female and they are attracted to male. Pero hindi sila yung stereotype na mahinhin, hindi sila. Alam mo yung sobrang rowdy na tao, yung quote and quote one of the boys, or yung kanyang pananamit at kanyang expression ay very masculine. And sometimes it hinders them to have a partner na lalaki kasi people would assume that they are lesbian or that they are tibok, which is not also always the case. So ito yung mga, so basically everyone has a SOGIE. Kaya i-pass natin ang discrimination bill kasi basically everyone has a SOGIE. It just differs to so many different people. Now, any other questions so far? Question? Just unmute your mic or any clarification. Wala? Okay. Wait. Itatawid pa ba natin to, Pastor Joseph?
Part 2 na lang yan.
Sige, okay.
Mahaba naman siya.
Yeah, I know. Medyo mahaba na nga. Okay, sige. Any questions so far? Any questions? Because we will end our session na. And then hopefully you could also participate. Next week, we will have another part of this SOGIE 101. Any questions so far?
I-share ko lang siguro yung thoughts ko po. Kasi before being exposed to the word transgender, ang idea ko ay boxed sa ang babae ay sa lalaki, vice versa, or kapag lesbian ka, you're attracted to female. Pag gay ka, attracted ka sa you're gay and attracted to guy. Pero nung na-expose nga ako sa word na transgender, yun, na-observe ko lang din dito na nasa New Zealand po kasi ako. May mga transgender men dito that they are also attracted to men. So, doon ako mas na exposed sa lawak ng spectrum. And doon ako namulat sa may toxic masculinity rin sa idea na even transgender men sa community, hindi dahil transgender man ka na dapat macho ka. You can also express yourself in some other ways.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. Yes, correct. In essence, dapat hindi naman other people ang magde-determine for us kung ano yung dapat na, let's say for example, expression. Although there are culturally and socially, merong, to put it bluntly, yung i-assign sa'yo, o dapat pag transgender man ka, dapat meron kang, yung kompleto package, balbas, muscles, yung looks, and all, at hindi ka pwedeng mag-cross ng very, very light feminine side. Kasi nga, nag-transition ka na nga, bakit ka pa babalik doon sa expression ng pagiging feminine? And that should be okay. That should be allowed. And I mean, again, no people should determine it for us, only really us. Thank you, Tim. Sa New Zealand ka pala. So, kaway-kaway sa mga New Zealanders. Any other thoughts?
Thoughts, questions? Questions about Adam?
Patrick O, do you have any questions?
Ay, hello po. Hello po, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said po kanina that there are trans people, transgender people who transition from being a transgender back into not being transgender. Now, my question po is, how is this different from it being just called a phase?
Medyo tricky ang tanong na.
Again, it's self-determination. We have to ask the person, does the person think it was a phase for him? Does the person think or feel that perhaps the being transgender was a valid experience, but that the experience or the consciousness now has changed? Kasi pwedeng ganun din eh. Pwedeng hindi naman niya dinideny yung pagiging transgender niya before. It's just that iba na yung kamalayan niya ulit. We have to ask the person how the person actually feels about it. There is a possibility that for some it is a phase. There is a possibility for some that it's just that their consciousness has changed. Their experience has changed.
Probably Patrick is, correct me if I'm wrong, probably this has something to do with the sex realignment. Is that what you're, or no? Kasi let's say for example, if a trans woman has already transitioned to, or with the sex realignment surgery, tapos they decided later on to change, yun ba yung concern mo?
Yes po.
That's why for trans women na mag-reassignment, may mga ano yan eh, at least as far as I know in terms of Western, the European American standard, may matindi at malalim at mahabang proseso ng psychological or psychiatric process yan before they can actually have a reassignment surgery, because there are instances where baka hindi naman nila talaga gusto mag-reassignment. Because you can be transgender even if
without
you
the reassignment. Correct.
The reassignment, and a lot of
realignment.
A realignment without. There's a lot of transgender people who are perfectly okay not reassigning or not having a surgery for that. But if a person chooses to do that, there is really this caution, this huge caution of having a long process of having a long psychological process, so that kasi wala nang balikan yun eh, at least as far as I know when it comes to trans women. Pag tinanggal na yon at iba na yung ginawa doon, there's no way of going back to it. So it is really a serious thing to consider for anyone who wants to do a reassignment or realignment.
Any other question, Patrick? Or is that clear for you?
That's clear na po. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Ram. Ram, you have a question. You're raising your hand.
Ay, actually hindi question, pero dagdag lang dun kay Pastor. Ang galing nung sinabi ni Pastor. Mas palagi ko yung paggamit lang ng term na face. Kasi yung face na term, parang siya question ng epistemology and patho. Parang nagiging scientific and linear yung pag ginagamit yung term na face. So in a sense, kung paano natin naiintindihan, medyo tanggap yung face, 'di ba? Medyo tanggap yung salita na face. Pero hindi talaga siya ginagamit dahil yung ginagamit nga natin ngayon na tungtungan ay spectrum.
Yeah.
So, ayun, yun lang yung paggamit lang ng term na face. Kaya yung iba medyo na-offend dun sa terminolohiya na face kasi naiintindihan nila yung spectrum nung attraction and nung emotional and sexual attraction. Ayun. Pero ayun, yun lang naman yung terminology lang na face kaya nagkakaproblema. Pero basically how we understood face, I think it's acceptable to the LGBT community. Hindi lang, ang problematic lang yung epistemology and patho na tungtungan pag ginagamit yung term na face kasi nagiging scientific and linear lang siya. Ayun, yun lang naman. Salamat.
Kaya warla mode yung iba Ram. Thank you, Ram. Warla mode yung iba. Thank you, Ram. Okay, Mabs, you were raising your hand. Mabs.
Yun po. Hi po. Bali, dun kasi siguro sa part na, thoughts lang din po about dun sa face thingy. Pero kasi, rather than using the word face, I think it's more of a continuum. Kasi kapag face, di ba, parang titignan natin siya sa process. Kapag bumalik ka sa process, kumbaga, kapag dinaanan mo na yung process yun, tapos pag bumalik ka, meron nang nagbago sa'yo eh. Meron nang nagbago, meron nang na-add sa experience mo. So, ibig sabihin, hindi ka na bumalik dun sa stage 1. Kumbaga, meron nang nadagdag sa'yo. So, gusto ko parang, ewan ko, sa akin yung continuum, merong nadagdag sa human experiences. So, though meron mga changes, tapos kumbaga, ang hirap talaga pag walang label. Kumbaga, kapag ibabalik siya dun sa label na ganon, I think it's unfair to say nga yung na-face lang siya. Kasi nga, meron lang nadagdag dun sa human experiences niya. Meron lang mga changes. Meron lang mga, yun po, parang ganon siya sa akin.
Very beautiful. Thank you, Mams. Yes. Oo nga, mas ano nga yung continuum. Is adding to the ingredients to what you are now. Yeah. Hindi ko na-expound. Yes. Thank you, Mabs. Any other?
I think si Zeke kanina, he also raised his hand.
Hi, Zeke. Zeke, you were raising your hand.
May question lang ako regarding dun sa spectrum ba? Yeah, sa spectrum.
Yes.
Like, kasi di ba it changes, it's a continuum, it changes yung attraction, both sexual and romantic attraction. Hello?
Go ahead.
Kasi di ba it's a continuum. So, like say for example, sa Philippines, it's a patriarchal country. So, is there a chance na magbago yung, kasi syempre pag patriarchal ka, the more masculine you are,
accepted,
the more attractive you get to other people. So, for us na medyo fluid sa part na yon, are there chances na pag na-diminish natin yung patriarchal mindset, magbago din yung attraction ng ibang tao?
That's a good question. Yeah. Okay, let me just put the story. So if, let's say for example, at some point in our life in the society that we have already broken the system of patriarchy, then anyone or any people can have a spectrum or a continuum of sexual and romantic attraction. Is that what you're asking?
Yes po.
Possibly, yes. I think that's possible since hindi naman na determine or hindi na na-assign or dinidictate ng society kung ano ang dapat na katanggap-tanggap na attraction or katanggap-tanggap na expression, then I guess that's a possibility. Then it's going to be a whole lot of love for everyone. Sorry, binakla ko na. Yes. Yeah, ikaw, Zeke, what do you think about that? Zeke? Is that something, if let's say for example that happened, is that something acceptable for you?
No, kasi if that's the condition, I mean, if that's the logic behind yung continuum, so ibig sabihin, if ever SOGIE bill passes next year or if it passes in the Philippines, it will break the patriarchal chain na parang, kasi di ba we're still in, I mean, yeah, we broke down the system of patriarchy in the society, but then, ano na siya, inculcated na kasi sa culture natin as Filipinos. So, pag ba napas yung SOGIE bill, there's a chance of breaking that mindset into us na parang will we be more open to, will we be more fluid to attraction? Parang ganon.
Yeah, I get your question. Well, number one, medyo mahirap pang itawid yung na i-break yung patriarchal mindset in the society. I mean, doesn't mean that, let's say, for example, we pass the anti-discrimination bill, that everything will be happy. Syempre, there will be resistance to so many different people. Pero if let's say, for example, a child growing up in a society where there is anti-discrimination bill, that can be a totally different story. Kasi yung context natin right now, we don't have that. Although there is visibility in terms of the gays, the lesbian, the LGBT community, there's a more visibility to the LGBT community. Unti-unti, I guess, unti-unti, magiging I don't know, probably baka mas maging fluid or continuum yung attraction.
Regardless of the law, for example, kahit maipasa ang anti-discrimination, I mean any law at all, law does not necessarily change society, but a law is a marker. When a law is passed based on human rights or justice or whatever, it is a marker that a certain shift in the consciousness of society has changed and is changing. So, hindi naman automatic kung pag naipasa yung batas, fluid na lahat or that wala nang magulang na magtatakwil ng baklang anak. No, that the very next day that the anti-discrimination becomes law, meron pa ding Bex na itatakwil, paalisin, hindi tatanggapin sa simbahan, etc. But the law gives you a marker that something is shifting, something is changing in society. Pero even though actually kahit hindi pa naipapasa yung batas, something has already shifted in our Philippine society. During my time, si Jack, I'm turning 36 this year. 10 years ago when I was in college, you wouldn't see young gay couples holding hands in LRT.
True.
When I was in college, I barely saw anyone who would do that. But now, pag nagta-travel ako, I mean, not during the quarantine, but last year when I go to Manila, when I go to Quezon City, nag-MRT ako, nag-LRT ako, I see young gay couples holding hands in public and they don't give a damn about it. May isa pang gay couple akong sinundan sa SM North. I followed them because I wanted to see if there will be anyone in the crowd who will actually call them out or give them the look. Pero wala. I mean, it was like a good 10-minute walk na holding hands silang dalawa in SM North, and no one actually approached them. No one gave them the look. No one said anything to them. So there is
a change.
Shift.
Yeah.
There is a shift. There is something changing, even as we continue to still have discrimination and oppression of queer people sa Pilipinas.
Mm-hmm. And also to add that, contextually wise, like let's say for example, kami in the 90s, at least our only model of queer is Roderick Paulate. But now it's entirely different. There are so many images, there are so many experiences that, we can relate to. Kaya nakakatawa minsan sa comment section ng mga anti-queer or anti-LGBT, yung nilalaro nila yung name na LGBTV, LGTV, ganyan-ganyan. Kasi ngayon pa lang nila siya na ngayon pa lang nila siya na experience. Probably they do not have that ano ba itatawid yung sinabi ko? But yeah, yun. Sige. Sorry, Mabs, may sasabihin ka? Mabs?
Hello. Hello po. Bali yung sa ano po kasi dun sa patriarchal society, and yun yung thought na yun. Actually, kaya di ba po nabanggit ko kanina na parang butch looking ako before. Pero somehow, parang to ensure my safety din, parang nag-ano din ako. Hindi ko nga alam kung consciously ko ba siyang pinili na feminine looking para to protect myself din, and parang ganon. Kasi kapag butch looking, medyo ano yan, medyo
intimidating.
Sobrang different yung experience ko ngayon na feminine looking na ako, tapos nung butch looking ako, very different din yung experience. So, ganun siya. Hindi ko alam kung conscious ko ba siyang pinili or dahil na-push ba ako ng ating patriarchal society nga. And yun lang po, to add yung kay Zeke kanina, na though continuum siya, meron pa rin talagang social factors na kino-consider yung bawat individual para for safety, I don't know, expression, ganun po. So yun po, to share my experience. Pero yung question ko naman po, bakit nga po ba natin, di ba, LGBTQIA, if what we're having, if this whole idea is a continuum in the spectrum, why do we need to put like LGBTQIA or mas parang yung most ko po kasi na ano sa akin parang question or minsan mga patawang ano, bakit kasi LGBTQIA++ ABCD ginaganon po na? So parang why, parang yung question ko po, why not parang come up dun sa parang kasi hindi ka siya specific eh. Parang halimbawa, di ba po binanggit nyo kanina, ang dami din naman na outside dun sa LGBTQIA+, parang non-conforming, ganyan. Meron siyang mga ibang mga details din na hindi ko alam kung naka-anchor ba siya dun sa LGBTQIA+ lang na tag. So, yung word po ba na LGBTQIA+ is nakakatulong po ba or does it limit pa rin para makita talaga yung, parang yung visibility talaga ng mga individual na nasa spectrum or sa continuum? Parang ganun po. Parang is it necessary to be called na LGBTQIA+ lang, or can we come up with a term na everyone is ano? Parang ganun po yung question ko.
Yes.
Yun po.
Thank you, Mabs. Yes, sa dinami-dami kasi ng experience that so many different people are having, it is quite difficult to really identify, each one of them. Though I think in my view, verbalizing them into the LGBTQ++ community, it's sort of a study or an educational material for the other people to understand. But at the same time, mahirap din nga mag-box kasi sometimes it's very confusing, especially with the rest of the society, with the rest of the straight people, at hindi nila naiintindihan siya. That's the reason why workshops like this, workshops like this sa SOGIE is very important na kailangan mailagay sa mga schools. Ganyan. Charing. Rev Joseph, meron ka bang i-add doon?
Sorry, ako
Ram, you're next.
Sige.
So, nagka-Ram. Go, Reverend Joseph.
It is both. There are reasons why we use LGBTQIA++, and there are reasons why it is beneficial, why it is not beneficial. Number one is because it is being used, or kahit ano pang term actually ang gamitin, it is important to use it so that people know that we exist, the label, the category, that the term is used so that so that we exist and the discrimination attached to it exists, the oppression that is attached to the label actually exists. So using it in a way is beneficial in terms of the political, social, cultural movement, no, to continue on fighting for the rights, to continue on naming the oppression, etc. On the other hand, the negative part is of course at yun nga naman din yung punto niya, no? We look forward for the day that we should no longer use these terms because equality, equity, justice has been achieved and people are no longer defined by the discrimination that they are experiencing, by the oppression they are experiencing. Yun naman yung goal. The goal is to no longer have these labels because you are a human person who happens to have a particular kind of consciousness, experience, attraction, expression. But for certain limited purposes, for now, certain terminologies are used to name our lived experience together with the discrimination and oppression attached to that lived experience. Like for example, in I don't know, in Europe or in the US, there's this movement, unofficial movement na ayaw na nilang gamitin yung term na LGBTQ. Ayaw na nilang gamitin yung term na LGBTQ. Gusto na nilang gamitin yung queer. The word queer to be an umbrella term for any sexual or gender minority. So meron din naman mga taong nagre-reject ng queer kasi sasabihin naman nung iba hindi niya binibigyang justice yung continuing injustice na hindi niya na-encapsulate yung lahat ng lived experience if you just say queer. So may mga ganyan.
Ram, you're raising your hands.
Sorry, actually nabanggit na lahat ni Pastor. Ang galing nung sinabi niya, pero segundahan ko lang. Bakit siya kailangan pangalanan? Dahil kailangan nating pangalanan yung kung saan nagmumula yung oppression natin at kung anong mga oppression ito. At bakit siya hindi na kailangan pangalanan? Kasi yun nga yung goal. Yun yung punto ng pinaglalaban na dumating doon sa lipunan na wala na itong mga boxes na ito. Pero kailangan nating maalala kung ano sila, saan nagmumula yung oppression at paano sila mabubuwag. Kaya kailangan pangalanan. Ayun. Salamat.
Thank you, Ram. Chris, you're raising your hand.
Yes. Hi. Okay. Hi. Gusto ko lang po sa inyong i-share kasi kanina nabanggit yung bakit yung pagbabago sa patriarchal society. I lived in Europe for 20 years and we are a little bit more progressive in terms of giving SOGIE equality to all gender. Yung importansya sa tingin ko ng pagkakaroon ng pagpapasa ng SOGIE bill sa Pilipinas ay pagkakaroon ng pagkakapantay-pantay na pagtingin ng batas o ng pagtrato ng gobyerno para sa atin ng LGBT sa Philippines. So, bigay ng yung tax benefits, for example, protection sa ating mga sa ating mga partners. Sa tingin ko po ang pagbabago sa ating society ay hindi basta-basta magbabago katulad ng sinasabi ng nakararami. Hindi ka agad-agad mababago ito, pero yung mensahe o message na ibabato ng pagkakaroon ng batas na magpoprotekta at magsusigurado na hindi tayo madi-discrimination ay isang simulang hakbang para makamit yung pagbabago sa ating society. Yun lang gusto ko idagdag. Tapos yung tungkol sa LGBT labeling, I think the reason why we're doing this is also for academic reason. Na to show that we are a wide, there are different people encompassing the gender hindi lang siya male and female. We wanted to identify na merong pang ibang part ng spectrum ng gender and sexuality. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Chris. Very beautiful. Mabs, you're about to say anything. Something, Mabs. Mabs, naka-raise yung hands mo. Hello, Mabs.
I think naka-clap.
Ay, hello po. Nakapindot lang po. Sorry. Pero thank you po. Thank you. Naka-clap po.
Ram, you're raising your hand.
Sa lahat ng answers po.
Thank you, Mabs. Ram, you're raising your hand.
Ay, hindi.
Sige. Okay, so yon. Pastor Joseph, any other closing speech? Sige, go. Bago natin i-end to. Pastor Joseph.
Nagsasalita ako, nakamute pala ako. So thank you for participating, everyone. I hope this has been an enlightening session. And even if it was not enlightening session, one of the common experiences was it takes more than one SOGIE workshop to actually understand SOGIE. Common experience yan ng mga nagsusogi for the first time. So don't feel frustrated if somehow may confusion pa o hindi pa masyadong maintindihan. It takes several sessions to understand. And again, this is how we do the workshop, at least for us. Other groups, other LGBT organizations might do it differently or explain it a little differently, but same principles. So next week, we might do the part 2 of this where we discuss what is the root cause of all evil. What is patriarchy? Anong implications? Intersectionality of oppression. And so there are 2 parts of it where one, it's very academic in terms of defining patriarchy, misogyny, saan ba nanggagaling ang mga yan, intersectionality. And then the other part is the conversational part where in-name natin yung mga experience natin. Yun nga, yung halimbawa sa Grindr, bawal ang fem, no fats, mga ganyan. Those are signs of internalized patriarchy among the LGBT community. So we will discuss those things and our lived experience of patriarchy next week.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. And we hope that you will join us again next week for another Zoom meeting. If you have any questions though, let's say for example, mga susunod na araw, meron kayong mapagtanto mga tanong, please, you can email or text it to us or send it doon sa Facebook page namin para probably we can, discuss it next time. And then we're very much happy that medyo maraming turnouts, maraming nag-participate. Actually, na-expect ko lang mga tipong 7-5 lang tayo, ganyan. But yeah, we're happy that you're here and hopefully you will join us again. And thank you at good luck sa inyong quarantine moments at home. So thank you and bye-bye!
Thank you!
Thank you!
Bye!
Bye-bye!
Joshua, ka muna umalis. Pastor Joseph, huwag ka umalis. Bye-bye! 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 Bye-bye!